Good afternoon and welcome. It's the Joel Natalie Show. We are live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here at 5th and State, also live on Facebook and on YouTube. We're having the crucial conversations that Erie needs, and when he's in town and available, we like to bring in the former congressman and just absolutely an expert on many things. Phil English, good to see you, Phil. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Joel. Great to be with you.
All righty. I got to go to that global look, and here we are. I don't know, last time you were here, we might have just been, 2 weeks in the Iran conflict or something like that. But here we are more than 6 months.
Yes.
And it is, I'm not going to call it a quagmire. I want to get your perspective.
My perspective is that what has happened in the Gulf of Hormuz is something that should have been anticipated. The Straits of Hormuz, the Iranians have always had the capacity to close. We know that all the war gaming has been around that for many, many years.
That's the kinetic part? Is that what you call war game?
Yeah. Basically, this was a problem we certainly did and should have publicly anticipated. The other factor here is that the Iranians have a great ability to sustain a lot of pain. Their government was decapitated. People can draw their own conclusions on the timing of that and the appropriateness and importance of it. But the fact is, for years, the Iranians have been a source of serious problems, deep mischief, instability, and many deaths in that region. So the idea, very clearly there's a rationale for regime change there. And the Iranian people, because they live in a police state, have been unable, even though it's nominally a democracy, they've been unable to exercise the right to remove this government in power. So my view is that what Mr. Trump did anticipated that this would lead to regime change, or at least a negotiated settlement that would result in a commitment to no nukes. But we have known that every treaty that the Iranians have signed with us, they have violated. So, we also know, based on how at the beginning of the year they systematically murdered over 30,000 of their own citizens because they were protesting, and essentially unleashed a reign of terror on their own country. The fact that the people who did that, many of them were killed in our preemptive strike, doesn't change the fact that what is left is still a very powerful police state that could keep their people down, and their people are not going to rise up unless they have some degree of certainty. And the fact that right now what we are doing is causing enormous economic pain to the population of Iran. But candidly, the people who run Iran are not sensitive to that the way they would be in a European country, in America, or in, if you will, a normal country with some democratic components. So, in a nutshell, they are trying to wait us out. They have figured, because they're not stupid and they know enough about us, that if they continue to block energy shipments, they're in a position where they can cause enough pain that it's going to create pain for the American people. We are producing enough energy that we can meet our own needs, but we don't have the refinery capacity to refine specifically what we are producing. So we are still wired into the global energy market, and that is driving up our energy prices. And I'll tell you, when I drive, particularly when I go back and forth to Washington, which I do by car, I've seen the price go through the ceiling. And I can appreciate how that impacts on people in Erie who have a limited amount of resources, who are on a tight budget, and simply having the money to drive your car to work, drive your kids to school, go to the grocery store. It is not a trivial thing to see gas prices go up $1 a gallon.
Yeah.
So that's what's going on here. And my view is that the Iranians have been smart and this is not a compliment to them, but they realize if they can ride out what Mr. Trump is trying to impose on them in strictures, and clearly, some part of that regime doesn't want to give up their aspirations to have nuclear weapons, that we now know they have the technology to deliver into Europe. They have shown that they have missiles that can hit European territory. It's only a matter of time before they have the capacity to hit North America. So all of this creates what they call a conundrum. And previous administrations have taken the view that if they wait out the Iranian regime, that perhaps that regime will crumple. It's not going to liberalize, but it may crumple before they get to the point where they are nuclear ready. Certainly, I believe that regime, unlike Russians during the Cold War, unlike Chinese, unlike some other adversaries, have very few scruples about using a nuclear weapon. So we have an enormous challenge facing us. And do we continue to bomb them? Do we go back to bombing them? Do we try to seize the straits? I thought that Mr. Trump's it may have been a casual proposal that the U.S. take over the straits. I don't think that'll sell well with the American people. So that's kind of my gut reaction to all of it. And this is an area where I don't pretend to be a military expert, but I do know a little bit about the Middle East.
Well, and I think we have to kind of unpack it for the average Erie listener of saying it is a conundrum because you're all for the troops. Again, what we're hearing out of the Navy, out of the USS Abraham Lincoln is disturbing. We don't know how much of that is spin, old news, whatever, right? The media is suspect, right? Certainly the vocalizations of the Iranian regime is definitely suspect. We have a lot of faith in CENTCOM, but we're also it's been a lot to have the president say that we were this close to a deal and then we're not. It's because we really don't have a good faith partner over there.
That there is certainly a lot to that. My own view is that the president, with his verbal broken field running of constantly saying we're close,
Right, yeah.
We've got a deal, they want a deal, but I'm not sure I want their deal, and all of that. That does not instill a lot of confidence in many people who are concerned. Item one. Item two, we have partners. And we have to have partners in the Middle East and Europe, and this creates a lot of uncertainty with them. Europe has been harder hit on energy than we have as a result of this. So you can imagine this has created some bad taste. There's been a lot of criticism over the years of George W. Bush and how he approached Iraq. And as I look back on it, I certainly would have done some things differently if I could have anticipated what was going to happen. And as I look at it, I maybe Maybe I should have anticipated, and I think certainly that administration should have anticipated more of what actually happened. But that said, George Bush went out and built a coalition of the willing. George Bush went out and made the case publicly. This was not a surprise attack. This was sending a clear message to Saddam Hussein that if you don't stop threatening us, and they were, if you don't stop going up to the edge of abrogating our treaty with you, which they were, then there's going to be a result here. I think that the other thing to consider is, in the end, there were many Americans who volunteered, and we depend on a volunteer armed services, went to Iraq, served honorably, did a lot for Iraq that is unacknowledged. But at the same time, there were many people that were killed or suffered, and this is the big thing, suffered horrible injuries from IEDs. And I visited some of them.
Wow.
So, one thing you can say is that this strategy in Iran, however flawed, really has had a minimal impact on casualties for the United States. I'm not sure that's the best distinction. I'm not sure that we want the situation we have. We may to realize objectives and to protect the world and that region, we may end up at this stage having to have boots on the ground, which is something that this president campaigned against.
Yes.
So I think everyone should look at this situation and think for themselves, decide for themselves, but also recognize that there aren't a lot of good choices here.
Yeah, there are not a lot of good choices. We're talking to Phil English. He's with us here. We're getting that global view. Stay with us. It's TalkErie. Phil English is our guest. It's 422. Let's talk about the politics of this Iran situation, Phil, because, November 4th is straight ahead here.
Absolutely.
And I just got to think that the IRGC is just looking and saying they're going to fold, that the American president is gonna try to turn a deal that will favor the Iranian regime, so that the election doesn't go as poorly as it's projected to be.
I think they're trying to put pressure on Trump, and the question becomes: Trump, being as unpredictable as he is he going to fold, declare victory, and leave, as one U.S. senator suggested in Vietnam right around 1968, or is Trump going to try to see it through and achieve some sort of regime change, or something in between? I don't think you get regime change unless you take the time to arm the Iranian people and some other surrogates in the region and go in without boots on the ground. I think that Iran is a large country.
Yeah, it's like the size of Western Europe or something crazy.
and it has a huge population.
Yeah.
And they are, and it's a rough terrain, and they're remarkably resilient. And this is not like pushing Kuwait around or something.
Yeah.
So and not only that, there are international laws and international norms that have been trampled a lot lately. There are forums which don't work very well, but where these sorts of things can be mediated. And I know, very much to their credit, Pakistan has been trying to be a real effective mediator.
And doesn't China play a strong role in all this? Because China gets a lot of energy from Iran.
China has an enormous interest in what's going on because they sell into the region. They are seen, as long as they are close to Iran, they're seen as very influential, and they produce far less of their energy than we produce of ours. They're terribly energy dependent on the Persian Gulf, and they are right now being squeezed by this far worse than we are. But they have a system where the Chinese Communist Party can pretty much tell their people whatever they want and also dictate decision making. So there is pain, but I don't think it's being presented in a way to the Chinese people that creates an existential threat to Chinese leadership. So they're in a position to ride this out. They're also in a position, as this crisis continues on, to look at ways how they can take advantage of this ultimately relative to Taiwan.
Yeah.
And
wow.
And everything that we do creates precedents and takes away perhaps our ability to come back and argue for international solutions. We have a lot of balls in the air right now. Some of them have been handled very well, but Iran is a real threat to our global policy right now.
I got to ask you before we take the break in 3 minutes, does this point out that warfare has fundamentally changed? We are kicking $2,000 or even $20,000 drones out of the
Absolutely.
air with $2 million Patriot missiles. It's insane.
But then warfare is always changing and has been, as technology has emerged. Warfare has been changing since the Napoleonic Wars at an increasingly fast rate. And as a result, yes, thanks to the innovations of, by the way, the Turks working with Ukraine, essentially perfected the use of drones, cheap drones, and drone warfare is like something we hadn't anticipated. When we went into Iraq, our adversaries under the radar screen were using IEDs in a way that had not been done before, and in a way that imposed a lot of costs on us. So having the best weapons in the world, the best Navy in the world, the most sophisticated technology in the world isn't necessarily the advantage that it had been. And don't forget, cybersecurity is a big piece of this. Iran is showing some evidence of being able to penetrate our cybersecurity defenses.
The other part of this that was I feel like a really important thing to tackle was the conventional weapons, not only the nuclear weapons, but Iran had really built up its missiles. I mean, didn't they hit a ship in Diego Garcia? I mean,
That's right.
They are they are a regional threat.
They have been impoverishing their people to free up resources to build these extraordinary military capacities that are dwarfed by ours. But they do have the ability to fire missiles that can reach into the middle of Europe now. If they can combine that with nuclear warheads, it creates a threat that could effectively could take NATO off the table. And that's a remarkable situation. And we, they aren't the only ones that I think are taking advantage of changes in technology. But right now, we are in a position, whether we like it or not, of not being able to pull back from the world because I don't think the Europeans are in a position to step in. I don't think I don't think that we can count on China to do things in a disinterested way.
Yeah.
They are adversaries of our system. And what Russia has done in Ukraine, with the comment that Ukraine has been amazing in its ability to resist Russia, and this has been devastating to Russia, and would be even more devastating to Russia if not for the fact that energy prices are going up, and that is helping the Russian economy bounce back.
Really remarkable. All right, we've got to take our break here. Phil English is our guest. We go to news, and then we'll get to more. Well, we're going to keep it on this side of the Atlantic for the second half of the conversation, as there's so many things to talk about domestically. You are tuned to TalkErie and the Joel Natalie Show. Thanks for tuning in to Talk Erie and the Joel Natalie Show, live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here at 5th and State. Phil English, the former congressman, and you're still consulting, right, Phil? Tell us a little bit about your portfolio there.
Well, to make a long story short, I work with a major Washington law firm. They are now in a position where they give me the freedom to do a lot of my work and work with a lot of clients from Erie. So it's a relief to Chris and I that I get to spend time in Erie and be involved in the local chamber and a lot of local projects. I do a lot of work on everything from international trade to healthcare and I guess the best way to put it is standard setting for the healthcare GPO industry is one of my big projects. I've done some international work, and I should disclose, since we've been talking about the Middle East,
right.
I represent, along with a couple of other people in the firm, the Kurdistan in northern Iraq, which has, is not technically a sovereign country, but it's an autonomous region. And they have a lot of their own issues. They're probably the best U.S. allies in the region and have been on the receiving end of more hostility from Iran than anybody else.
Yeah, you hear this back and forth of, well, maybe we should arm the Kurds and they would invade.
Right. So,
yeah.
So I have a nice balance of being able to be in Erie a big part of the time and splitting my energies and clients between healthcare, foreign policy, a lot of policy advice, and some lobbying, because I do like to engage people on the Hill directly.
Do you, we're talking about domestics, and why don't we start with politics so we make sure I get through it. I feel like we have really kind of jumped the shark with our politics, insofar as you have a MAGA right, and then you have like this what Ben Shapiro would call a horseshoe right, where basically you have people on the right that are advocating kind of socialist ideals like the left does, and then you have the kind of the moderate Democrats, and then you have the Democratic Socialists. Is the DSC, for example, kind of the Tea Party of the left?
I think there's a compelling case to be made that that's exactly the role that they're playing right now. The intriguing thing to me, as somebody who's been tracking this stuff going back to my salad days in the 1970s, is that socialism now is no longer a dirty word. After the Berlin Wall fell in 1989 and it was revealed that most of the countries that had adopted socialism had essentially enforced poverty on their own population, and communism basically was a completely defunct prospect. Human rights had been terribly abused by those regimes on the far left, and that's something that I think many people have now forgotten. It is most of what the Democratic Socialists are proposing is socialism that's been tried in different places, including the United States, and found to be unsuccessful and incredibly expensive. The Cato Institute has a study out right now of all of the promises made in the Democratic Socialist platform, and they would add tens of trillions of dollars to federal spending. And their solution would be tax the rich. Well, there is not enough resources in terms of income among the 1% or even the 10% to fund most of that stuff.
Yeah.
Now, so where does that leave us? You can do a wealth tax, which is a confiscation, but I question whether that's constitutional. And I that's a debate that I think we need to have.
What about this tax on unrealized capital gains? I mean, they're saying that it will blow up Silicon Valley and the venture capital world.
Absolutely. I do a lot of tax work and tax policy work going back to my Ways and Means days. A tax on unrealized gains is a tax on wealth that is only nominal wealth. And it would be disastrous in terms of the incentives it would put in place. My concern is that right now we have an out of control fiscal situation, and neither party is addressing it. And the one component on the right that you didn't mention is the old faction of conservatives in the Republican Party that are basically fiscal conservatives and who basically drove the Republican agenda to force Republicans who went into the majority in Congress during the Clinton years to come up with a budget deal with Clinton that allowed us, by the time Clinton left office, to actually have a balanced budget, 100%. Unexpectedly so. It corrected itself quicker than we anticipated. All of that is what we ought to be talking about doing right now. And candidly, there are so many demands from the right and the left on the public treasury. There are issues that haven't been addressed. Within a few years, Social Security is going to run out of money. I mean, not completely out, but it's just that the revenues coming in won't be able to, we will have expended everything on the books that we have. And essentially, with less money coming in, people like me and Social Security are going to have to take a Social Security cut. I can handle that. Not many people in Erie are going to do well with that kind of scenario.
There's I think the national number is 40% have not saved for retirement, other than, it's Social Security or nothing,
Right.
40%. In a town like Erie, it's probably closer to 50,
I recently had a family member who was primarily dependent on a very small Social Security check, so I can relate to that.
Sure.
My sense is that nobody is talking about these things in a way that permits the American public to realize how imminent they are. We're running, I believe, 6+% deficit on our budget, and you just can't do that in a sustained way. If you can reduce your deficit to about 2% and grow the economy at better than 2%, which is what is happening right now, then over time, and in less time than you think, the deficit, the national debt shrinks relative to the size of the economy and becomes manageable. But right now, most people don't realize their share of the national debt is about $300,000.
Oh my word! Yeah, that's unreal. The conundrum I'm trying to deal with this current administration is, when President Trump took office in the second term, he brings on Doge. They're going through trying to find waste, fraud, and abuse. You hear these stories about different programs that, whether they were looked askance because of DEI or other priorities of the administration, they're not getting funded. So you would think that, and they greatly reduce the Washington, D.C. federal workforce. There's a lot of people that got laid off, especially from the Biden years, which was a big increase, right? All that to say, it still seems like we're not making much, any kind of progress on the deficit or the national debt.
The Doge initiative is viewed by many in Washington now as something of a failure. And I will acknowledge the fact that there were parts of the federal government where no one had gone in with a scalpel or a tomahawk in recent years to try to make cuts. But most of the cuts were not made with a scalpel. And many of those job cuts were reversed in part subsequent as people who were making the cuts suddenly realized what the role of some of those jobs were. Basically, if you're going to shrink the federal government, you need to shrink the federal workforce because that has been the pattern everywhere. But you don't do it as you make cuts in a tech company. Go in and just slash and then rehire people if you actually need them. It's a different world. It's a different set of regulations. It's a different set of laws. And ultimately, you need a quality, dedicated workforce that has experience administering the programs in order to achieve the efficiencies that you're trying to achieve. You know, the basic point is, simply reducing the workforce is not enough to put a big dent in the problem. You need to come up with more creative, cost-effective ways of doing service delivery, and you also have to think through how to adjust the programs to end waste and redundancies. I will give the Trump administration credit. They have gone after waste in government. They haven't defined it very clearly sometimes, but what they've done in identifying waste in, for example, state Medicaid programs,
right,
is entirely appropriate.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure how to answer it, Joel, except to say I think that some of this needed to be tried. And I think we need to acknowledge that if we're going to shrink the federal deficit, we need to come up with a better way of doing some of these programs that may require less resources, but will still continue to deliver quality care support. We're going to continue. We need to continue to have a safety net, and we just need to define exactly what our priorities are in providing those services. Here again, full disclosure, I represent a large charitable network, and we advocated against the administration's cuts in Medicaid, and I think that was fair to do. That isn't to say there isn't a better way of giving states more skin in the game and more responsibility for policing their Medicaid systems to eliminate some of the redundancy and waste.
Before I run out of time, again, former Congressman Phil English is with us. I want to look at the political picture going into November and the day after, into 2028. The Democrats do have a problem, and kind of the Republicans have had a problem. I feel like the president got what he wanted when he defeated some of these very, very high profile senators in those primary races, but these very large Democratic primaries that we're seeing here, where the socialist candidate is winning. What are your thoughts on all that? And is that going to come to a head come November?
I think it's going to be a very serious problem, but it's a problem that may come to a head after November because they are winning in many places where the Democrats control the House seats. So in the House, I think you will see a much bigger census of Democratic socialists, and it depends on what tactics they want to use. They are talking about trying to knock off Hakeem Jeffries and adopt some of the same tactics as parts of the right did going after Kevin McCarthy, and they ended up in a tight division, taking him down. The Democrats need to win in the House this year by a fairly significant margin in the House to govern. And the biggest barrier, I mean, they have a wind at their back. People are mad about prices. People are mad about domestic economic issues. They are tired of the environment in Washington. They're tired of not enough getting done on some of the big issues they really care about. But because of gerrymandering and some other factors that are kicking in, the fact that Democrats have only raised something like 20% of what Republicans have.
It's amazing.
Usually, contrary to what most people assume, usually Democrats out-fundraise Republicans at the congressional level by a wide margin. That's been reversed this year, and so I think Democrats are going to be in control of the House. I will be criticized for saying this, but I have been telling clients this. I think Democrats are favored to control the House. But I also believe that the Senate is going to be a toss-up. And one area where Democratic Socialists may make a difference is in seats like Michigan, where Al Sayed, hard left candidate but attractive, is running against my old friend and colleague Mike Rogers. I think Mike Rogers is, unless the whole Trump political shift, the whole anti-Trump political shift occurs, I think Mike Rogers probably wins that. And I think even in Minnesota, where Republicans haven't captured a seat in the Senate in years, the Democrats have nominated a lieutenant governor who is tied to a lot of the scandals and a lot of the bad rhetoric and controversial positions. The Republicans have nominated a sportscaster, a woman who is pro-choice and who is phenomenally articulate. And I think she will be a very interesting candidate. It's still a long shot. I think,
but they do like their celebrities in Minnesota, don't they?
Yeah, and I've known Susan Collins for years, and I have to tell you, she is the most resilient individual I have ever seen. I have a lot of friends in Maine on the Democratic side who just can't stand her, and she is so smart, so pragmatic, and she also is independent in an authentic way that drives the Trump White House crazy half the time. I think she has a very good chance of survival despite the bad year. But I think Republicans...
Well, I've got to think that the Maine Democrats are depressed at this point because their guy failed,
Well, their guy failed, but he was replaced, and he was replaced with a guy with a lot less baggage.
Yeah.
Not a greatly attractive candidate, but not as flawed a candidate. And that may be enough to get them across.
Who shows up at the midterms? I mean, again, you always could count on the 65-plus super voter, right? Or do you really have to be concerned with that Gen Z, highly educated, super left showing up?
I think the hard left is white hot in this election, and they're going to turn up. And a lot of people who don't necessarily like Democratic Socialists and also don't think that Hakeem Jeffries has done much in opposition are still going to show up to vote against Trump. I think that Trump is still the center of gravity of everything in the political system right now, and I think he's doing very badly in the polls. I think Republicans are down, latest numbers I saw, in preference by about 8 points. If that holds up until Election Day, I think the Democrats will control both chambers.
Wow.
I think you're going to see states like Alaska in play, Iowa in play, although I think the Republican is going to end up winning there. She's really good. I think you're not going to see Florida in play, but you're going to see North Carolina. Even though I like the guy who has been nominated, I think Governor Cooper is going to be very tough to beat, and that's likely to be a Democratic pickup in the South. Finally,
and I've just got about a minute. By January 2nd, 2027, is Donald Trump the lame duck, and does that give freedom to Republicans to kind of maybe advance some kind of maybe just center-right program there?
I don't know. And I've talked to some people who've speculated on this. I don't know. Is the Republican Party going to be allowed to move on from Donald Trump? What does a J.D. Vance candidacy actually look like, or is it going to be Rubio? And there are others. The Republicans actually have a fairly good farm team. It's just that most of them have been pushed pretty far into the back. The Democrats have, I think, more of a challenge coming up with the right challenger. They've got a lot of shop-worn candidates, and I'm not saying that just as a Republican. There are a couple of folks who could surface. One of my colleagues at the firm used to be roommates with Senator Ossoff when he was a young staffer. Ossoff could be a very interesting candidate emerging as a presidential candidate, and I don't rule out AOC running.
Yeah, 100%. We're going to leave it there.
Thank you.
Former Congressman Phil English, thanks so much for sharing the hour with us.
It was an honor to be with you, Joel, as always, and I'm a listener when I'm around.
Beautiful. We got more ahead here at TalkErie.